Hey everybody, Miss Maritello here. This video is going to be about matrix multiplication. To get started, I wanted to talk a little bit just about like tips and tricks. So when I do matrix multiplication, I always like to start by identifying the dimensions of both matrices, just to make sure that the matrix multiplication is possible. If it turns out that it is, I like to figure out what dimensions the product is going to be, and then I do always try to keep in mind that I think that matrices are really cool, since matrices dimensions are always in the order of rows and then columns. I think like RC, really cool, rows then columns, and that kind of plays in with the matrix multiplication as well. And then I always try to be careful with my integer operations, just because with the adding and the multiplying, there's like in the positives and the negatives, it can be very easy to make a mistake. So our first one, again, I like to start with identifying the dimensions of both matrices. So here I have a 2 by 2 and a 3 by 2. And a couple of you guys might already be realizing, uh-oh, this does not look good. So when I go through to multiply them, I just kind of like to show, and I'm going to actually erase this. So like if I want to start going through, I'm going to see on here that if I did the first row by the first column to give me the spot of the first row, first column, I'd start by doing 3 times 4 and then -1 times 2. But then I'd also be looking for what number can I multiply by the 11? And there's nothing there. So I don't have a number to multiply by the 11, so then that's one way that I can know that the matrix multiplication is not going to be possible here. And then I just kind of like mentioning, so like, again, that happened with a 2 by 2 by a 3 by 2. I'm missing a number to multiply by the 11. And if I was to have gone to this spot and done the first row by the second column to give me the number in the first row, second column, I would have done 3 times 6, -1 times -7, but then I don't have a number to multiply by the -3. So had I had an extra column of numbers in this first matrix, then I would have been able to do it. So like when I had the 2 by 2 by the 3 by 2, it did not work. But if I had an extra column of numbers here, it would have made the 2 by 2, it would have changed it to be a 2 by 3. If I had another column of numbers here to be able to multiply like by the 11 and the -3. So if I did a 2 by 3 by a 3 by 2, that would work. So what a lot of people notice is the middle numbers, if you were to write out the two like sets of dimensions, the middle numbers always have to be the same. So when I go back to this one, those middle numbers were not the same, so then the multiplication was not possible, and I didn't even need to do anything else. Let's take a look at another example. So say that I went through this one. So here I have a 2 by 2 by a 2 by 2. So the inside numbers are the same, meaning like the number of columns in the first matrix is the same as the number of rows in the second one. So like that means that I'm good to go. I can do the multiplication. So if I want to start in this spot in the top left like corner, that would be my first row and my first column of the product of the matrix. That's going to be the answer. So then if that's the first row, first column, then I need to multiply the numbers in the first row by the numbers in the first column. So that's going to be like 3 times 4 and then the -1 times 2. It doesn't really matter which spot in the matrix you go to next, but say like I go right below, now I'm in the second row of the matrix, but this is still going to be the first column. So then I need to look at the second row and the first column. So then I'm doing 4 times 4 plus I'm doing the 6 times 2. And then when I go over to the next column, the next column, so this is the first row, but the second column, then I'm looking at the first row, or top row, and then the second column. So 3 times 6, and then -1 times 0. And my last spot, this is the bottom row, second row, and the second column, so then I'm in the bottom row or second row with the second column here, so I'm doing 4 times 6, and then 6 times 0. Then I can go through and I can do all of those like little operations of simplifying. Here I have 12 minus 2, that gives me 10. 18 plus 0 just gives me 18. 16 plus 12 gives me 28, and then 24 plus 0 gives me 24. Trying another example. So again, I like to start with the dimensions. So this one, it's got 1 row, 4 columns. This is a 1 by 4. And then this one is got 4 rows with 2 columns. So this is a 4 by 2. So I can do a 1 by 4 by a 4 by 2 because the inside numbers are going to be the same, and then my answer will be a 1 by 2. And remember, we can get the dimensions of the product by looking at like the outside numbers. So the inside numbers, again, they tell us that we can multiply. Yes, we can. They're the same. And then those outside numbers tell us what the product is going to be. So starting this one, if I want to start in this spot, this will be my first and only row by the first and the first column. So then I'm multiplying my first and only row by the first column. So 4 times 6, 3 times -2, and then -2 times 1, and 1 times 0. And then when I go to do the other part, 4 times 3, 3 times 7, -2 times 9, and then 1 times 1. Because there is so much like multiplication and adding in this one, if you want to do an intermediate step, I think that's a nice idea. So then I'll have 24 minus 6 minus 2 plus 0, and I got that right below. And then 12 plus 21 minus 18 plus 1. When I go and I do that, 24 minus 6 gives me 18. 18 minus 2 gives me 16. 16 plus 0 is just 16. And then over here, 12 and 21 is 33. 33 minus 18 is 15, and then 15 plus 1 is 16. So again, my answer is a 1 by 2, and both numbers just happen to be 16. And this last one, we got a 3 by 3 by a 3 by 3. I tried to put this in the recording, and when I made my last take, it said that it went on too long when I talked it through. So just a little bit about this one. So again, it's a 3 by 3 by a 3 by 3. So I'm allowed to do it. The middle numbers would be the same. If you wanted to pause it and try it on your own first, you absolutely can. Here is my work for it, but just kind of talking it through a little bit quickly. Say that I want to come up with my number that would be my numbers that are here. This is the first row, and then the first row and the first column. So then I'm multiplying my numbers in the first row. Oops. Well, okay, so the 9, the 12, and the -2, and the first column, which would be 1, 2, and 2. So like 9 times 1, 12 times 2, -2 times 2. Say that I want to go to these next. That's the first row, and then the second column. So then I'm multiplying the 9, the 12, and the -2 with the 0, 4, and 1. And then kind of the same idea for the last one, except for then I'm looking at the third column, so first row, third column, so the 9, the 12, and the -2, but then with the 2, -5, and the -3. Then when I go into the second column, so like specifically, ooh, I'm having a rough time with the highlighting here. If I'm going into the second row, so then I'm looking at the -1, the 0, and the 5, but I'm still in the first column, so I'm multiplying like -1 times 1, 0 times 2, and then 5 times 2. So again, the second row, first column. Then when I come here, this is the second row and the second column. So I'm in the second row, -1, 0, and 5, and then over here I'm in the second column, 0, 4, and 1. So I'm doing like -1 times 0, 0 and 4, 5 and 1. When I go to this spot, I'm still in the second row, so still looking at the second row here, -1, 0, 5. But then now that I'm looking at the third column, I'm going to be looking at 2, -5, and -3. So like -1 times 2, 0 times -5, and then 5 times -3. For the last spot here, well, or the last row, I guess I should say, not really the last spot yet. I'm looking now at the bottom row, or the third row. This is the third row, first column. So then I'm looking at the 4, -3, and 0 with the 1, 2, and 2. So 4 times 1, -3 times 2, and 0 times 2. When I come to this spot over here, so those same numbers from the third row, then with 0, 4, and 1. And then the last spot here, I'm in my third row, third column. So 4, -3, and 0 then with 2, -5, and 3. And then we can go through and we can do all those calculations. And I should end up with 29, 46, -36 in the first row. Second row, 9, 5, -17. And then in the third row, -2, -12, and 23. Hopefully that video was helpful. Thanks for watching.